Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. During the Meteor event, I decided I would spade a bunch of aviation vehicles, and the most recent one was the Su-24M, because I'm an idiot. The Su-24M is in the Soviet tech tree. It is pretty high BR, battle rating 11.3, and you'll find it just before the Su-34 and just after the MiG-27s. I recently actually researched the MiG-27K and spaded that one out, and to be honest, it actually wasn't that bad of an experience. You basically just do the standard, you bring some incendiaries, you bring the R60Ms, you hit a base, and then you go after a bunch of other planes with the R60s. And I thought the Su-24M was going to be the same experience. I was wrong. This vehicle is way worse in the general kind of playstyle as the MiG-27K. It was really funny when I started spading it out because there was a bunch of people which were just like, you should just go spade it in sim. And I was like, nah, you know what? I'll stick with aerialistic. I try and keep everything the same, like in the way of kind of grinding them. So therefore, I kind of have like a base layer of what I'm doing with all the different vehicles. But I get why people were saying go play it in sim, which is basically a PvE mode when you play stuff like this. It's because this vehicle is terrible. It just doesn't work in aerialistic. It's not as bad as some of the other vehicles that we played, such as the F-117, for example. But the Su-24M just doesn't fit. It just doesn't work very well because of a few factors. So, first of all, even though the vehicle has access to a ton of different ordnance options, including a bunch of missiles, guided munitions like GNSS bombs, has some glide bombs, which are kind of fun to use, has some rockets, has some incendiary ammo, has some dumb bombs, and of course, it starts with some stock R60Ms, which is really nice, and then you get 4 of them if you upgrade them. Most of these ordnance options are completely worthless when it comes to aerialistic. And the reason for this is because they all stack on top of each other. And the hardpoint amounts that this vehicle actually gets for most of its munitions is an incredibly small amount. So for a game mode like Ground, where you only need maybe like 4 missiles or 2 missiles to be hyper effective in this thing, or maybe just a few TV guided bombs to be hyper effective, in air you need more ordnance to actually justify your existence, since you are a massive flying boat basically, which isn't fast enough and cannot defend itself at all from the threats coming in. So the vehicle is limited in its weaponry in a massive way. You can either take something like the R60s and then some of the guided munitions to be able to hit some of the ground targets, which you just don't get any score for, or you can roll the dice and bring some incendiaries, which is basically what I did with the vehicle. Bringing 4 incendiary bombs, meaning that I could destroy 2 bases if I got to the bases before everybody else, and then we could go from there. Now, one of the interesting things you may find from the modification tab is the incendiary bombs modification isn't actually there, and that's because it doesn't exist. The way you get the incendiaries is you actually unlock the Fab 250/500 modification, because this gives you access to installation of up to 500 kg bombs, but it doesn't actually specify the bombs, but it does include the incendiaries. So you need that modification. The More system also, as a rank 1 modification, gives you way more countermeasures, a better RWR, and then also access to obviously the More. The stock Su-24M only gets 24 large caliber countermeasures, whereas with the More upgrade, it gets 96 large caliber countermeasures, and you are going to need this, and I am not joking in the slightest. This vehicle burns hot. This vehicle has 2 huge engines, massive engines in the bottom of it, the Saturn AL-21F3s, and for some reason they burn like the power of 1,000 suns. And you need to fire so many countermeasures to be able to stop even the most standard missile. I have had missiles which have looped up and down, even with my afterburner off, and already hit this thing. Now, there may be a problem with countermeasures right now, because this is something that was actually happening on a few other vehicles I was playing too, such as the MiG-21MF, which I've recently been playing yesterday, so take it with a grain of salt, but it was incredibly hard for me to be able to actually dodge missiles in this thing. because of that. They just homed in on this thing so easily. So whenever I ran into something which was like a IRCCM IR missile, I was just dead. I was not going to live. That's just kind of how it goes. Just understand you are going to die. You are not fast enough to get away from them, and you are too big to actually dodge them. And then if the enemy players get close enough, which they will, because you are once again not fast enough, then you will just get gunned down because you are such a huge target. So the modifications, as I said, you need them more. You need the 500 for the incendiaries, and then you realize that a bunch of the modifications are actually tied together. All but one of the kind of modifications on the right-hand side are tied together. All of the bombs are tied together. All of the missiles are tied together. All of the rockets are tied together. So in order to progress through the modifications, you have to research a bunch of modifications that you just don't need. So instead of focusing on the performance upgrades, which is what this thing needs desperately since it's so bloody bad at accelerating around the place, you have to instead focus on menial, pointless modifications and realistic that don't do anything for you. And that is a problem. This vehicle only starts becoming a vehicle when you research all of the flight performance modifications, and only then. And that is how ridiculous this vehicle is in terms of how it actually flies around the place. And it just sucks. That's the only time when, if you have your wings swept back, you can actually run away from enemies and survive at least longer than, a few seconds. There was a few times, at least for me, where I had to completely modify how I play these vehicles to try and fit this thing, and most of the time it worked, but a lot of the time it didn't. Another problem with this vehicle is it's obviously a base bomber. As I said, you can bring the other ordnance if you want. You could bring, let's say, the guided glide bombs, right? You can actually bring 4 of them, which is fantastic. But guess what? 2 of them are actually on the pylons, which the R60s use. So you can only actually take 2 of them. Or maybe you could bring the CAB 500Ss, the GNSS bombs. Oh wait, no you can't, because they're on the R60 pylons again. So you can actually only bring 5 of them. So you could only hit 5 targets. And yes, the optics on this thing are fine. They're nothing special. They're a little bit short for a vehicle like this. 23 times on it for the optics, but at least they're usable. But because you have the R60s that you need to take to try and defend yourself against things, you are limited to basically maybe 4 hard points at most, which is not a lot of ordnance. So you have to use the incendiaries and hope to get the bases. And guess what? You're not fast enough to get the bases. So what ends up happening is you have to take the long way around, flank the map, because if you ever get engaged by anything, you just die because you're not fast enough, you cannot turn with it, and you cannot really do anything. You have a head-on ability, and that's it. And then after that, you have to hope that the fighters on your team, which all of the premiums, as I said before, with all of these types of vehicles, Gaijin just decided to give a bunch of premium vehicles all of the ground ordnance, so now people just use them to bomb. If I see a Nova MiG-23ML bombing a base with incendiaries, I'm going to lose it. Because the Su-24M only has one job, and it does it worse than the fighters that you play alongside with in this event. That is the cold hard truth of the Su-24M. You are worse than the fighters that you play alongside. It has a really interesting radar that you never get to use. It has a really good RWR, which is actually super useful and really nice, because it tells you when you're about to die, which is fantastic. I actually kept the Morse system on at the start of the match, and then later on I would turn it off after the initial engagement, because, I didn't want to basically get popped randomly by things. It also has the 23mm rotary gun. Very nice noise, really interesting to use, generally quite a fun gun. but also at the same time doesn't have a ton of ammunition, and the armored targets belt doesn't have tracers in it, which is kind of funny. So just watch out for that because yeah, it has a stealth belt and then also an armored targets belt where you can't see stuff. But the vast majority of the weapons are worthless on this thing. The vast majority of the time you are just a bucket, but the main issue is the acceleration. Everything accelerates so much faster than you. So what ends up happening is because of the battles in air, you are just slower to get to places than everything else. You are 10, 20, 30 seconds behind everything, and as anybody will tell you, if that's the case when you're playing stuff like Air Realistic, then you are fully out of position and everybody else is just going to cane you. So this vehicle, was it fun to play? No. Will it be fun to use in ground? Probably, which is why I spaded it out, but at the same time, it's probably going to have a few issues there too, because of the optics, and also, once again, the very small amount of weaponry this thing actually gets. It took 43 battles to spade this thing, 47% win rate. Most of the time we actually had like a 20% win rate. We ended up having a kind of rally by the end, and we won a bunch of battles in a row, so it was horrific to play. 72 air kills, 28 deaths. A lot of those air kills were AI, so don't be surprised. And then also ground targets destroyed was 85, because when the bases were taken, which was pretty much every game, I had to use the bombs on the AI, and since they're incendiaries, you can get a few of them, especially if you go after the trucks. Horrific experience, don't bother with it. If you are going to do it in sim or something like that, so you can just play PvE and not bother with it, and just play the more fun machines. The MiG-27s do the job of this thing at a lower BR and are much more fun. Just play those. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.